Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. Does the diminishing daylight during fall and winter leave you feeling sad? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Dr. Norman Rosenthal, is the world-renowned psychiatrist and best-selling author who first described seasonal affective disorder, SAD, and pioneered the use of light therapy as treatment during his time at the National Institute of Mental Health. A prolific researcher and writer, he has written more than 300 scholarly articles and authored or co-authored 10 popular books. These include Poetry RX, the New York Times bestseller Transcendence, and the national bestsellers The Gift of Adversity and Supermind. His website is normanrosenthal.com, and he joins me this week to discuss his healing path and latest book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, a guide to health and happiness through all seasons. Please join me in welcoming back to Vox Novus Dr. Norman Rosenthal. Welcome back, Dr. Rosenthal.
Oh, great to be here again.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about your latest book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, a guide to health and happiness through all seasons. But first, for our listeners meeting you for the first time, please share your early path and how it led to medicine and psychiatry.
Well, I always was fascinated by the workings of the mind. And even when I was 16 years old, I knew I wanted to be a psychiatric researcher and try to understand how the mind works and how it went wrong when it didn't work. So that is a course that I pursued through medical school in Johannesburg, where I was born. And then I came to Columbia to do my psychiatric residency. And following that, I came to the National Institute of Mental Health, where I did a research fellowship, and that got me to track along some interesting lines of research that have defined my research career. At the same time, I always wanted to be a clinician and a writer. So I have had a clinical practice all this time and a coaching practice. And I have also written several books, which have been the subject of our conversation in the past. And that's partly what we're going to be talking about here as well.
Yes, when you last joined us, you shared your wonderful book, Poetry RX. How did you discover the therapeutic nature of poetry, and how is this applied?
Well, poetry has always done a lot for me. I have found various poems through the course of my life that have been a comfort, an inspiration, a source of ideas and creativity. And it always struck me that if I collected a group of these poems together, not long ones, short ones, because that's the whole point, is not to embroil somebody in a long poem like the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but a short poem, a sonnet, a villanelle, something short that really delivers an important point. And so that's what I wanted to do. I collected 50 of them together, and it has been one of the more delightful surprises of my writing career, because initially people thought, oh, my poetry, don't give me that. Even my wonderful colleague, Jane Brody, who was a columnist at the New York Times for many years, and we had collaborated on several articles on my work together. And this time with the poetry, she said, that's not for me. And I FedExed her my manuscript, and within a day or two, she said, okay, I'll do this one. I really want to. It just really speaks to me. So that was a wonderful turnaround. from a good friend and columnist, but also so many people that I've spoken to have gravitated towards this book as inspirational, interesting, helpful. People who've said, I've never really understood poetry, saying, now I really get it, and it really means a lot to me, and I have it by my bedstand, and that sort of thing. And of course, for a writer to hear that your words have actually reached people, there's no greater reward than that.
Absolutely. Are there one or two poems that stand out for you as having the most therapeutic value?
So many do, but one, one has come to mind recently. So many people are grappling with a breakup, and sometimes people are so invested in their relationship that when they break up, they feel as though a piece of themselves has been lost. So in a section called Loving and Losing, I have a couple of poems that deal with that particular experience. And the one that I would like to read today is Getting Over a Breakup, Reclaiming Yourself. That's what I call it. But the poem itself is called Love After Love by Derek Walcott. And here it is. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
So that is an example to me of this brilliant man using this image of the mirror to say, rekindle the relationship with yourself. And the image of a man looking in the mirror is the pivot, the mechanism by which this reclaiming occurs. If you want one more poem, there are so many good ones that I want to be sure that I choose well. And to choose, I will select a poem that is a villanelle, maybe the most famous villanelle of all time. Now, a villanelle is a very carefully structured poem. It consists of 19 lines. Certain lines recur. They come back again and again. And they're very, very difficult to write well. But when they are well written, they are gorgeous. They are beautiful. And I have 3 villanelles in this collection. The one is One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. There's another one called The Waking. And this one, of course, is Do Not Go Gentle. And I will read it now, if I may.
Please.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those with us, sir.
Difficult to read the second poem without getting a tear or two because of this intense bond between father and son, and the son having to say goodbye to his father and wanting the father to rage and not let go of life because the son himself presumably can't tolerate losing the father, and he himself is raging against the impending loss. So it is such a loving and at the same time terrifying poem because it does confront that last moment of the bond between father and son. So here are two very short little examples of the kind of connection that I try and create between the reader and the writing in this particular book, Poetry RX.
The last time you were on, I had shared with you that poetry has always been a form of expression for me, especially at times that I've had challenges in my life. And my mother passed in January of 2020. And in the process of my grieving, I started having these visions of circles and rings in my imagination. And this poem came through me as part of my healing process. May I share it with you?
Of course, yeah.
It's called Circles and Rings. The path of great beauty in so many things, from atoms to galaxies, circles and rings. Natural wisdom that dwells there within, from naught to 360, that magical spin. We circle each other in gravity's dance, as Gaia circles Sol, the solar romance, as Luna circles us in life-giving motion, drawing the tides and inner emotion. And the age of the oak is found in its rings, as in woman and man and all living things. And when the rings stop and life comes to an end, we'll all circle back and dance once again.
Powerful stuff.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, sir.
What effect did that have on you? What did it have a healing effect?
Absolutely. It helped to abate my grief.
Well, there you are. What more can you ask from words than that?
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. You're also well known as an expert in transcendental meditation with 2 best-selling books on the topic. Transcendence was a New York Times bestseller, and Supermind became a national bestseller. What are some of the benefits of a regular meditation practice?
You know, as I think about how best to answer it, I'm almost overwhelmed by how much this practice has done for me and many people whom I know. Some have been my patients and clients, others my friends, people I have directed to this practice. It is so astonishing that a simple practice, of course it's simple, but it also needs to be learned and needs to be practiced, of thinking a mantra or a word sound and taking a little time each day to do that takes you into a place in your mind that fills you with relaxation, but also with energy and activation, and at the same time is a masterful stress-busting technique and a magical creative technique. I recommend it to my clients who are stuck in their creative processes. I recommend it to people who are overworked and have too much to do and are experiencing physical or psychological effects of that. And I find it to be, for me, a foundational habit.
Absolutely. Many of our listeners are regular practitioners of meditation, and I'm sure they appreciate the sentiment that you share. Your latest book is Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, a guide to health and happiness through all seasons. You are world famous for your breakthrough research with SAD and developing the light therapy to treat it while you were at the NIMH. Please tell us about the nature of SAD and how many people this affects in the United States.
Well, SAD is an exaggerated effect psychologically and physically to the changing seasons. I say exaggerated because for many people, they can observe the seasons quite pleasantly, the leaves changing, the days getting shorter, the days getting colder. These may be trivial changes to some, but for a significant percentage of the US population, there are consequential changes in behavior, in feelings across the seasons. Specifically, when the days get short and dark, some people can slow down, eat more, gain weight, oversleep, withdraw from friends and family, struggle with their cognitive functioning, putting things together, their careers, their professions, and can become very depressed and withdrawn. And so this can happen and continue for 3, 4, 5 months, starting maybe in September, October, and going all the way to February, March, even April. So it's a significant chunk of the year and a significant chunk of the population. Some estimate that 5% have it to a severe degree. That's probably a good 20, 30 million people. And another 15% to a lesser degree that we call not sad, which is the more extreme form, but the winter blues. People who are just not at their best, they're not at their most cheerful, most productive, most creative in this time. So I would say 1 in 5 people experiences negative effects at the change of the seasons. And I'm talking specifically here from autumn to winter. And then to a lesser degree, this is just unpleasant. It's a creative block. You're less effective. You're having less of a good time. And to the greater degree, it really does impair your ability to have relationships and do your work.
How does SAD differ from other mood disorders, and how do you differentiate between SAD and clinical depression?
Well, to start with, SAD is a form of clinical depression. When you've got SAD, if you went through a checklist of symptoms that qualify a person for depression, you will qualify. It just is a specific type of depression insofar it has this very clear relationship to the changing seasons. So it is a kind of depression, but the kind of depression in SAD is different from some other depressions in that in other kinds of depressions, you can lose your appetite, lose weight, not sleep. And in this kind, you often eat more, gain weight, sleep more. So some of the symptoms differ, but at core, it's a type of depression just as bad as any other.
It almost sounds like you're describing when an animal goes into hibernation.
Yes, it's a good analogy. In fact, one of my earliest patients said, I should have been a bear because bears are allowed to hibernate and humans are not. We're expected to get up in the morning and do 1,000 things. And when all you feel like doing is curling up in a ball, that thought alone is enough to send you into a spiral of depression.
Now, are there other manifestations of SAD in other seasons?
There are actually, and in fact, I do deal with each and every one of them in the book. But summer depression is definitely there, and it may well be a response to too much heat. And as we know, the Earth is getting warmer, and areas are becoming more and more difficult to endure, especially during the summer. And so people with summer SAD may have a specific vulnerability to the heat, as opposed to the winter folks who have a vulnerability to the lack of light. So the other thing is that they do have different clinical presentations in that they do eat less and sleep less and feel agitated. In addition, the summer sad is actually more dangerous insofar as they're more likely to contemplate suicide and even go on to take their own lives.
Mm. I happen to love the season of autumn, but I know there are many who find a difficulty with that season. What about autumn?
You know, autumn is such a fascinating season because, just as you say, some people are dreading the forthcoming winter, and other people are relishing what Keats called season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. There's this really gorgeous poem called Ode to Autumn by John Keats that really celebrates the sounds, the smells, the colors of autumn in a very beautiful way. And so it is that the colored leaves, so many of us go and look at the foliage, the ripened fruit, the fruits of summer can make this a very seductive and wonderful season, unless you're one of those people who knows, that if autumn's here, can winter be far behind? Not really. So I think what the seasons do is they sort of select us out. Which of us likes this one? Which of us likes that one? And I think that one useful way to look at the changing year is to look at it as like a wheel, the whole year altogether. And so I organized my book to go season by season, stressing the good things about them, but also the things that you have to watch for. And autumn, of course, is a time to make a checklist if your winter is a troubled time. Spring can be wonderful. It can be a release from the winter, or it can be a trouble in its own right. In fact, most of people do take their own lives those who do are going to do it mostly in spring and summer, as I mentioned, not in winter. So I think that we have this beautiful diversity in our population, and that diversity is shown in so many ways. And one of the ways that it emerges is in our different responses to the changing seasons.
My guest is Dr. Norman Rosenthal. His latest book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, A Guide to Health and Happiness Through All Seasons. Dr. Rosenthal, please share with our listeners where they may get your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Well, yes, thank you. You can reach me on my website at normanrosenthal.com. There's a page on Amazon of all my available books. And just as we discussed, there are 2 books on transcendental meditation, transcendence, and supermind. There is my last book, Poetry RX. There is a kind of a memoir and self-help book combined called The Gift of Adversity. And it's all about growing up in South Africa, coming to America, some of the famous and fascinating people I've met, including Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. That was one of the most meaningful visits that I've ever had with somebody, because he was certainly one of the greats, one of the greats in my pantheon, at any rate. And so A Gift of Adversity is something worth looking at. 52 small chapters, each one with a little takeaway. And I took that format and repeated it in Poetry RX. So each of the poems has a series of takeaways, things that I've learned from them, and hopefully some of my readers might learn as well. And then, of course, my latest book, Defeating SAD, is really a condensation of 4 decades of my work in the field of seasonal affective disorder and seasonal changes. In this last book, I have very deliberately made it short, simple, to the point. I feel like people these days don't want a long rigmarole. They want, give me the bottom line. So I have, but I have tried to pepper it with some intriguing quotes and intriguing little vignettes. One I'll tell you about right away was an 18th century French psychiatrist named Esquirol. And a man came to him, a businessman, in the autumn and said, look, the last 3 winters, I have gotten so depressed, I've contemplated desperate things, and I'm about to go into winter again. Should I go to a hospital and be confined there? And Esquirol said, not at all. That's the last thing you want to do. What you need to do is you need to go to the south of Italy and stay there through the winter and only come back when the winter is over. And this the man did with outstanding results. So just little vignettes like that to think that here was this rather brilliant psychiatrist giving this sort of very counterintuitive advice because he had already at that time an insight that some people have radical responses to the changing seasons.
Brilliant. And we'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Dr. Norman Rosenthal. We're talking about his new book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, a Guide to Health and Happiness Through All Seasons. Dr. Rosenthal, what is light therapy and how does this work as a treatment for SAD?
Well, we originally conceptualized light therapy as something to replace something that's missing. In other words, with the waning light of autumn and winter, some people were expressing illness as a result of light deprivation. And we thought if you just replaced the light that wasn't there, people could be restored to their healthy selves. So we worked to find ways of taking a box-like structure that emanates much more light than you would get from your ceiling lights and expose people to those lights and bring them out of their depression. And in fact, that's what happened. We did it with one person. We followed it up in controlled studies. And Then other people replicated it, not only in the United States, but in Europe as well. And so now, when we think of how to treat seasonal affective disorder, light therapy is a primary way to do that. And of course, there are a lot of little ins and outs of it, which I do completely lay out in the book. In other words, what kind of light? And there are different kinds of boxes from different manufacturers, and people are guided through some of the features. Like, for example, you don't want a teeny weeny light. You want a light of a certain size, maybe 1 foot square in its face that faces you, and so on and so forth. There are times of day that are better than others, like the morning. There are durations. There are side effects to consider, like not using it too late at night and keeping yourself awake, not jazzing yourself up too much, which people with bipolar disorder can do, not hurting your eyes if you've got some kind of retinal problem. So all these things are involved in doing a good job of treating oneself with light therapy to help your seasonal affective disorder.
Now, may SAD also be treated with natural light?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, getting outdoors on a sunny winter day and going for walks can be extremely helpful. And hills are wonderful because they offer you the high intensity intermittent exercise that comes from going up and down hills. And so that's one thing I do on winter mornings when I can. And it's very, very good for your cardiovascular function and for your mood. Looking up at the sky, getting the benefit of the light, these are very good things to do. And also remember that getting natural light in from outside is important. So you may want to trim the hedges around your windows or clean the windows, which might be grimy from summer crud that has collected on it. These are all a derivative of our understanding that a lack of light is bad and more light is good when it comes to SAD.
I'm curious, here in the United States, we have what's known as daylight savings time. In parts of the world where that does not exist, is there a difference in SAD?
That exact question has not been scientifically answered, but I know the one thing that daylight savings time does for people with SAD is that all of a sudden you are confronted with an extra hour of darkness at the end of the afternoon. And this can be very depressing to people with SAD. And to counteract that with light at that time of day can be very therapeutic.
Are there any potential side effects or precautions to consider when using light therapy?
Definitely. You want to, as I said, use a proper, well-approved light box that has been screened for ultraviolet light, because that could damage the eyes. You want to use not too much light, because that can cause side effects, and sometimes quite bad ones. If you've got a tendency to mania, it can trigger a manic attack. So you don't want to do that. And eye strain, headaches, these can occur. But I should say that overall, light therapy is a very benign and well-accepted treatment.
Now, we talk about the season beginning in the fall, but when should those with SAD actually start light therapy? Should they wait for that seasonal change, or should they start before?
I think earlier is better. But of course, if it's already in the middle of the season, then you want to just start as soon as you can. But in an ideal situation, the autumn is better, because then you can preempt and get ahead of the game and prevent the symptoms from occurring in the first place. And of course, that makes a lot of sense. prevention is always better than cure.
How may individuals incorporate light therapy into their daily routines, especially during the darker seasons?
You know, it boggles the imagination to think of all the different ways, but typical ways are at your desk in the morning when you are looking at your computer or your emails from the night before, at the breakfast table, when you're attending to your personal grooming in the morning. These would all be good times because they're times when you naturally are in one place. You're not running around. And then, of course, you get to your office, you sit down, you can turn on a bright light there as well. The times when it's not usually a good idea for most people is very late at night, because you can keep yourself up at those hours. And of course, we all need our sleep. That's another important foundational habit that we need to attend to.
For those who do incorporate a meditative practice in their lives, should that be done in conjunction with the light therapy?
You know, it's either or, because I know that in the winter, I need my light first before the meditation. In the summer, you're probably not doing your light therapy anyway. But there's such an abundance of light that you have a lot of flexibility as to when you do your meditation. In the winter, if you have SAD, often the earlier you can get your light therapy, the better you're going to get traction through the day from that investment. So I would do my light therapy first and then the meditation. But if your problem is not that bad, you can flip it around. Trial and error is the best way to tell you what works best for you.
Are there specific guidelines or recommendations for choosing the right light therapy devices or sources?
Yes, there are. If your seasonal affective disorder is very marked, you certainly want to go with one of the bigger boxes. If it's not so marked, then a small tablet-sized box may be fine. Also, if you need to travel with your light boxes, then smaller is better. And often clients of mine have used more than one of those tablet-sized light boxes, arrayed in such a fashion that the light can come from both sides, almost like a stereo system would bring sound from both sides. And that way you can expose more of the retina to light. So these are some of the considerations: severity of the illness, cost considerations, portability of the light boxes. Those would be dominant themes.
What is the actual activity within the brain while undergoing light therapy?
Well, that's a great question. I do have a section in my book that looks at that. For some time, it's been known that the retinas of the eyes contain receptors, rods and cones, other receptors that then go to the hypothalamus, where the body's clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short, the body's clock takes in that neural input and then is effective in orchestrating your daily rhythms, your so-called circadian rhythms, as well as activity, and that in turn feeds back onto mood. But what's really fascinating is that more recently, researchers have found that there's a completely separate circuitry that is specifically related to the effects of light on mood. Again, it comes through the retina. Besides the light circuitry that goes through the suprachiasmatic nucleus, there's also light that enters the eyes, acts then on specific neurons called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs, intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. And as their name indicates, they have an intrinsic capacity to be receptive to light and to stimulate the nerve impulses to pass to the relevant part of the brain, which is different from the suprachiasmatic nucleus and is directly responsible for mood. So let's go back for a moment to the daylight savings time and the immediate effect of that hour of darkness in the afternoon that makes you depressed, and consider that if you are going to be giving yourself light at that time of day, just after that daylight savings time change, that will stimulate those IPRGCs, and that will have a direct effect on mood. And this is a newly discovered mechanism that is going to, in my opinion, lead us to some very interesting connections with seasonal affective disorder.
My guest is Dr. Norman Rosenthal. His new book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, A Guide to Health and Happiness Through All Seasons. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out, and for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Dr. Norman Rosenthal, his latest book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, A Guide to Health and Happiness Through All the Seasons. Dr. Rosenthal, please share some of the foundational habits that promote holistic health and happiness throughout the year.
Yes, I often think of Aristotle, who said we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And the idea of living an excellent, healthy life is a habit, a set of habits. And I strive to live by that because I want to live a good, healthy life as long as possible. And to do that, I know I need to exercise. some aerobic exercise, some strength training, and I try to do that several times a week. And I talk about myself, but it's because I would like for my patients what I do for myself. I feel like a good parent feeds their children what they feed themselves. And a good doctor gives the recommendation to their patients that they give to themselves. So regular exercise, aerobic and strength training, good sleep, and there's a whole set of items that are important: a darkened room, don't push your timeline so that you expect to fall asleep in 5 minutes. Give yourself time, and so on and so forth. Don't get yourself into a tizzy late at night about stuff. Say, hey, wait a sec, that can wait till the morning, and so on and so forth. So exercise, sleep, meditation, we've spoken about, is another way of strengthening the psyche, and something that I recommend and practice myself. Diet, of course, and diet doesn't mean I'm going on a diet. It's funny because, when I was growing up, they used to have these fad diets like pineapple and chicken diet, and that's all you could eat for a week, and then you were supposed to lose weight. And funny things, funny combinations that were supposedly combinations that would cause you to lose weight, even though you could eat whatever you wanted. It was really a silly notion. But what we know now is that it's a food plan or a way of eating that, allows you to enjoy your food. Of course, that's important, but at the same time, recommends that you stick with certain guidelines. So those would be, my fundamental habits. And I do mention all of them in relation to seasonal affective disorder. There's a favorite story of mine when it comes to transcendental meditation. There is someone I interviewed in Scotland. She is a litigator, a lawyer in Scotland, who had a very prickly disposition. She was very irascible, and everybody commented on it. And then she took up transcendental meditation. And people said, "What's the matter with you? Are you well?" Others said, "Are you on medicine? Because you've become so nice all of a sudden." And even her opposing counsel in a case said, "You're a pleasure to work with. And this is so different from how you've usually been." So anyway, this lawyer, litigant in Scotland, gave this beautiful description of how her temperament was tamed, as it were, by regular transcendental meditation. And she said when she did so, she said she would get more the luck of the draw, is how she put it. People would be nicer to her because she was nicer to them. She said even those traffic wardens, which was what they call traffic cops, I guess, even those traffic wardens who love to give me tickets actually are now showing me to where I can find a parking space. And who ever heard of such a thing? So I think that these habits change who we are, how we relate to the world, and therefore how the world relates to us. And these foundational habits are very valuable and very good for us.
And how may these habits help impact those who are dealing with seasonal affective disorder?
Well, I think there are some specific behaviors that are very good over and above these general behaviors that are good for everybody. And that is maintain your social schedule. If you have lunch with a certain person every week or with certain groups every week or however often, keep your social schedule. Don't fall off the wagon from a social point of view. Keep up your exercise regimen. Do interesting things, different things. If it's a snowy area, go cross-country skiing. If it's a hilly area, go hiking. Whatever it is that you can do that keeps you feeling alive and engaged and active is going to help your mood.
Have you ever thought of addressing news affective disorder or social media affective disorder?
Well, I think you need to be careful because I think you get a kind of an adrenaline high from, if you hate a certain person and then you join a group, all of whom hate that person, and then you have a lot of fun slamming on her or him or a group of people, or you love guns or you hate guns, or whatever it is you love or hate. You find a group of like-minded people and you reinforce each other's preferences and get very riled up in the process. You worry a great deal about weight and body image, and you're basically stoking the flames of whatever it is that's burning you up. Maybe just cool it. Do less of that. I know I used to do much more social media than I do now. Right now, I go and find what I'm interested in. I don't let the social media craze du jour lead me by the nose and get me all riled up, especially, I might say, late at night.
With all of the negativity being shared on a daily basis, what would you suggest that we do?
I suggest that we slow things down a little bit. And a lot of the things that I've said, like the meditation, good sleep, is going to slow you down, because a lot of us get fueled by our adrenaline and get fueled by our anger. And I think we need to take it easy. I mean, we're all people. I'm reminded of that wonderful expression by Rodney King, the guy who was imprisoned in Los Angeles and really mistreated. And he said, can't we all just get along? And it's such a simple statement. And at the same time, there was something in its naivete and in its simplicity that really tugs at one's heartstring. Can't we just get along? Isn't that really what we want to do? We want to have a successful country where people are working together. We want to be helping one another the best way we can. And if we burn up our energy and our mental energy in battles that oftentimes go nowhere, I think we're really moving in the wrong direction.
What about common everyday kindness and compassion?
I think that's one of the most important things, kindness and compassion. I think the Dalai Lama put it well when he said, be kind whenever possible, and it's always possible. I think we need to look within ourselves, because we're not just loving, kind, adorable human beings. We're also, some of us, most of us, sometimes angry, envious, competitive, aggressive. These are parts of our fiber, and sometimes they're necessary and they do a lot of good for us. But sometimes they get in our way when we're being unnecessarily competitive, not telling people that, oh, go up that way and you'll find that you can get through the traffic much more easily, or just reaching out in some way,
Absolutely.
Go to that part of the store. They've got much better fruit than here, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Just little kindnesses that can make a difference in a person's day. And I find that, I try my best to do that when I can. I'm not perfect by any means, goodness me, but I always feel good when I do that. And I must say, I feel very grateful when people are kind to me, and that happens quite a lot. And the more I meditate, the nicer I am, the kinder people are to me. It's called, in the TM, Transcendental Meditation world, support of nature, when nature seems to be collaborating with you instead of blocking you at every turn.
Absolutely. The wisdom of Dr. Norman Rosenthal. His latest book, Defeating SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder, A Guide to Health and Happiness Through All Seasons. Dr. Rosenthal, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for a really inspiring interview. NormanRosenthal.com is the title of my website, and you'll find all about the different things that I offer there, my books, my services, my clinical work and coaching, my research. You'll find out a lot about me, and please come and visit me there. I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram, all the usual ways to connect with people, and LinkedIn for those who are interested in a professional connection. Please come and visit me, and thank you for listening to this.
Dr. Rosenthal, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this wonderful wisdom, which is so needed in our world today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Herman. Have a wonderful week.